I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Auditor, paymaster, chief accounting officer, otherwise known as city controller. I'm delighted to be joined today by the LA City Controller, Kenneth Mejia. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, the first thing I really want to know is you ran a grassroots effort to get this job, and you obviously won the election, and here you are. What was it about the controller's office that really intrigued you and you wanted to run and be in this position?
Great question. So as you said, the city controller is the accountant, the auditor, the paymaster. So my background is in accounting and auditing. I'm a certified public accountant, our city's first. And I was looking at the history and saw that we never had a CPA before, or an accountant or auditor. So I said, this is a perfect position for me. And with this position, you could really bring about transparency on finances, on city operations, on policies, because people want to know. And we did a good job at that when we ran for the office, and now we're here.
Very nice. And then also the whole idea of, a political, interest in the first place. I know that you were actually inspired by other politicians.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, growing up, when you grow up in LA, it's very hard to be engaged in politics because of just so much inequities or poverty happening around LA that people sometimes give up. But when you see people out there who are doing the work, all the community organizers who are helping the unhoused, who are helping tenants struggling, that really inspired me and along a lot of people on our team to get more involved in the political process. So that's what happened.
Cool, very cool. Okay, so now that you're in the position, and you mentioned that you're a CPA and that you have this great accounting background, what exactly does the office do? What are the basic things? I mean, it's a complicated city, in very, very many ways. But in general, what is your office responsible for?
Right. So we have 5 major divisions. We have our financial analysis and reporting division. So they're the ones who make sure we have all the financial statements, the reports, the accounting, and the appropriations of funds that need to be moved between different offices and departments, especially when a council files pass or when the budget just recently got passed, making sure we're staying within budget. We also have our accounting operations division. They handle all the payroll. They handle all the checks, making sure that we're providing oversight, that all the invoices, the support are there in order to make sure these payments happen. We have our management services division. They're the ones who help us within our department, who do the accounting for our department and also do our HR. We have our audit services division, which gets probably the most attention, but it's probably one of our smallest divisions. And our audit services division, we're in charge of providing performance audits, making sure that the city is operating efficiently and effectively. And we also have a fraud, waste, and abuse unit in there too to look after fraud, waste, and abuse in the city. And then lastly, we have our executive office, which is more of the front office facing with the public, which I'm in, our chief of staff and more.
Okay, so part of all of this, is transparency. And I think that that's sort of been on the top of the list because you've created a lot of really interesting visuals for people to sort of understand what's happening with the city. And one of the things that you've talked about are maps. So the office has created a wide array of maps for people to kind of get a tactile piece of information that they can understand. So what are some of the things that you have focused on with maps, and what are you hoping those maps will achieve for the people who look at them?
Yeah, great question. So maps do provide a better visualization of data, especially from a geographic perspective. A lot of times the city produces tables or charts or even sometimes maps, but sometimes the maps are not interactive or usable or accessible in a way that's easy to understand. So some of the maps we've created are around homelessness, around public safety. We made a map, for example, about unhoused deaths in the city of LA to understand where our unhoused community are dying, so that could help policymakers to address certain areas and what were the reasons or the causes of death. We just released a map last month about 4118 arrests, which is an anti-camping law, pretty much to show where these arrests are happening, which usually target unhoused folks as well. And pretty much, with these maps and these analysis, it also helps these districts understand how policies are affecting the population at hand. And so, those are just some of the maps we've created. We've also, we're working on more maps on arrest as well. We're working on a map that spotlights evictions as well, because as we know, the housing crisis is huge. And so, these maps are there to tell a story better than words can or a table can. And so that's why we make them.
So the information that you garner to use for these maps is information that's already available. It's
either already available or we request it. One of our good maps, another map we made is our affordable housing map that shows where affordable housing covenants are. And sometimes...
Did you find any?
Oh yeah, yeah. And so pretty much that has helped people find housing. And so, that's this data, like you said, it's either open data, it's already on the website, or we request it.
Okay, so the tech part of it, you must have a pretty sophisticated person that's able to, create these visuals, because, you're sitting in a studio and tech is not easy.
Of course, yeah. We have Varthon and we have Neon, who are part of our tech team, who have helped tremendously create so many maps, so many chart tables. It's been really great how we made this office into more than just accounting and finance and auditing, but actually bring more transparency with these visualizations.
Are you noticing that people are catching on to them? Can you check whether there's an uptick and everything like that? There will be after we talk, of course. Everybody's going to want to see all of this.
One thing we're known for is making billboards of budgets. And so we saw other cities putting up billboards of the city's budgets. And so I think we could see what we've done in LA resonating with people throughout the country.
Okay, so along the list of things that you had mentioned, you said it's kind of a small department, but it's an imperative department, and it's kind of, one that one would actually think is, necessary, is auditing. You get to audit a lot of things, and you audit quite a bit of the departments and what they're doing. And recently, I think one of the things that really obviously lit a spark and people were interested in what your office did is the idle special funds. Were you surprised to find that there were these funds to the tune of 70 million in unused resources and 50 million available to continue to use that had just been, did everybody know about them and nobody talked about them? Or do you think that nobody really understood that they were there and that we should start, moving forward about what to do with them?
So I believe that what's missing, and especially in terms of the past, is that push to get departments to actually use it. So every department knows their balance of special funds, right? Our job is to look at those funds and then bring that up to them and spotlight it and show like, hey, we actually you have these funds here that could be used on housing, on homelessness related projects, programs. We should try to use it. It hasn't been used in 2 years. Some haven't been used in over 10 years. And pretty much, that's our job, is to make sure that we're using our funds to the fullest capacity. Because we always talk about how we don't have money, but we have money sitting around as well. So that's one of the great work, one of the things of our accounting team did to find.
So along those lines, so now the information is a little bit more apparent. It might have been there, but not really talked or not really, part of the front of the conversation. Who decides now what happens with that? Who is looking at this and who's saying, oh, well, we can't, that project's gone. We, we don't even have that impetus to do anything with that. And can we move it into the general operation funds, or can we redirect it to some of the more crisis-oriented things that we're dealing with in the city? Who makes those decisions? Who's looking at this? And then we'll say, okay, thank you, Kenneth. We appreciate all the hard work that your office did. Now we're going to do this.
Great question. So we pretty much, when we reached our report, we reached out to all the administering departments to come up with a plan, and gave them 2 weeks or so to tell us what the plan is to be using these funds. And pretty much, these funds are very, like I said, useful for some of the most dire issues that we have here, like housing and homelessness. So we expect departments to come back to tell us what their game plan is, or if they don't need it, we can close out the special fund or return the funds or repurpose the funds, depending on how the special fund was set up. One of the things too that people don't realize is that there's a cost to keep these special funds open. The administration, it takes time to do the accounting, and pretty much we just want to make sure that in the future, if we do create these special funds, there is a sunset clause so that these don't stick around and just stay hanging over our heads and not being used, and we incur administration time and costs just to keep these up. So pretty much, we'll wait to hear back on the departments who handle, especially the $50 million of funds that could be used, and then go from there.
So as far as audits are concerned, that was one, but you get to do a lot more. The office gets to do a lot more. So what are some of the general audits that take place during a fiscal year? We just, we're moving into one now. You kind of ended up, in office for the last half of one fiscal, and now we're in another fiscal. What's the pattern of auditing, and who gets looked at, and is it annually? Is it?
It's a great question. So, earlier I said that our audit services division is one of our smallest divisions. And I just want to reiterate that we just hired a performance auditor this week, and that adds our total to 7.
Woo-hoo!
And we have over 40 departments and bureaus and agencies. And it's not feasible or practical to audit and find efficiencies or what's working or what's not working with the amount of people that we got. And so when we pick what we want to audit, we pick with intention to make sure that it's something that people care about, that's something that is going to make a difference. And so, our audit teams, like I said, are almost 7 now, but each team makes up 2 to 3 auditors. So if you think about it, that's about 2 audits or 4 audits a year, depending on what you're auditing. And so for this fiscal year, we're working on finishing up our audit on public safety in regards to police helicopter usage, if they're efficient, if they're effective. We're also looking at our unarmed response programs to see how are they working, do they exist, are they not working. We're also doing audits. Our audit teams are working on homelessness related issues, so pathways into permanent housing, and as well as also looking at interim housing if data collection is there, are shelter beds available, how are we getting that data, and pretty much those are the 2 big ones right now. So I wish we can have an auditor for every department, because audits are not a bad thing. They are there to help the departments figure out, well, what are we lacking on? What controls are missing that are leading to inefficiencies or ineffectiveness or fraud or something that's happening that should be caught. And audits can either find those things and help the city and the taxpayers, or they could reaffirm to people that we did our audit and everything's working perfectly. We'll visit again in 4 years. And I really feel that our audit teams can really shed a light on finding inefficiencies and what's ineffective for our government and for taxpayers. So.
Okay, I'm okay with my own finances, and I'm really good with my taxes and everything, and I'm very honest in all those things that you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. But I am not learned in this.
Right.
So, let's just say you're looking at the numbers in a particular audit. How do those numbers? Because it's really, here's a receipt, here's income, here's expense, here's ins and outs. How does an audit tell you that an efficiency is happening or a waste is happening? How does an audit do that with you when it's those numbers?
So there's 2 types of audits. There are fiscal audits, which are more of the financial side, making sure that our numbers and our financial statements and reports.
There's a receipt attached to whatever money is spent. Okay.
Are booked in accordance with the proper accounting procedures or guidance, which we call GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. We also have performance audits, which is where you get the most traction. And I think the people love the most. The taxpayers love these the most. Performance audits are where you try to find out, did it take us 20 days to paint 10 feet of sidewalk? Did it take us 2 hours to respond to a 911 health emergency? Those are the performance audit side, where you find out, okay, well, this is what's happening now. This is why. And then what recommendations can we give, which is where we come in. We give the recommendations. But at the end of the day, our office doesn't have the power to change those operations. We only can give the recommendations and put a spotlight on it. It would be then pretty much in the mayor and the city council's ball and their court once we give out our reports and our recommendations. Hey, maybe we should make these changes.
So it's basically how many people did it require to change the light bulb?
Right,
So
exactly.
Okay, so that made perfect sense.
And that comes with a cost because you're paid an hourly rate. So if you make $100 an hour and you have 10 of you changing a light bulb,
that might not be a good efficiency.
Exactly, not a good exactly.
Well, a lot of the things that your office has been really concerned about, and obviously everyone in the city as well as the country, as well as there's no limit to who cares, is this thing about homelessness and housing. So what have you learned from your constituents about that issue? What are you hearing, and who's telling you, by the way?
Right. So our office likes to do community listening sessions.
Nice.
So we go out into different districts and we actually hear constituents' experiences in regards to certain issues, whether that's public safety, housing, homelessness. We'll go into apartment buildings and meet with tenants to learn about their situations with their landlords or how the city is reacting to their situations. In addition, many of us in our executive team come from an organizing background with the community. And so when we came in here, we sort of already have a sense of what people are care about. And pretty much that's how we develop the work that we do. So that's how we've been able to get that information.
Interesting. And then also another subject that's been near and dear to your heart, as well as near and dear to a lot of people, is the issue with the animal shelters.
Right.
During the pandemic, the animal shelters were truly empty because people wanted that comfort and that companionship, and things have changed. So what have you learned about the animal shelters and what's going on there? Because I know that's been...
So earlier this year, our director of special projects, Vincent, released a transparency report. It's about 80 pages that details shelter operations, what they do, the population of animals, the amount of kennel space that we have to keep animals in, and we're finding that the way the city is operating around animal welfare is it's underperforming, and there are a number of reasons, right? Over the past decade or so, the Animal Services Department's budget has either been stagnant or low. It's right. Luckily, this year they did get a 20% increase in their operational budget, so it went up to $30 million from around 25. But it's still not enough. We have a $13 billion budget, and when you look at the stats and the reports, you could see that it's getting worse and worse and worse every month. So you have the South LA shelter, for example. That shelter needs the most help. It has over 400 dogs and about 243 kennels.
Oh my
so
God.
If you think about it, there are these most of the shelter dogs are large animals. So you have these kennels that are not that big. They're probably the size of this desk or so. And you have them doubling or tripling up. It could lead to fights. It can deteriorate the health of the animals. So it makes it harder for them to be adopted. And also many of our shelters are outside. So during the summer heat or when it's cold, they're exposed to the elements. We also saw too that there are not enough staff, right? And on some days, on a good day, you can have 11 people working, but that's not the reality. Sometimes it's less than 10 animal care techs working, and you have shelters that have over 300 animals, and it's like, how do you realistically help that many animals? And so what we're seeing is, well, how can we help them? And budgeting and funding is just one issue, but I do believe that this needs to be taken up more seriously by all of our elected officials, because we all have the power to make change and make it an emergency. In addition, the top reasons why these animals are getting surrendered are they have too many pets, their landlord won't accept them or allow them to have a landlord, or they weigh a certain amount, they have no time. So we list all these reasons about these on our website, and that's what we'd like to do for all 40 departments, is have this monthly updates on how animal welfare or whatever the department's doing, to give people an idea of how we're operating.
Do you think that these kinds of reports can actually change where things lie on the priority list?
Oh, definitely. Our report is used when we're talking about, well, what does the department need, or what policies should we look into, or what studies should we do?
Renovations.
Right, renovations, or how do we get animals to be spayed and neutered? Pretty much, we feel that the work that we do in the controller's office is to provide a spotlight on what's working, what's not working, and then give that to the public and the policymakers to make the systemic change. And what we're good at is we're good at bringing that to light and causing attention.
So speaking of what you're good at, you come from obviously a technologically savvy, generation that understands that visibility is important and information can get transmitted in a bunch of different ways. How have you incorporated that into your office? I mean, there seems to be a lot of ways to hear, see, feel, touch what's happening in your office.
Right. So social media played a huge role on how we got elected. In addition, we do, like I said, listening sessions. We have newsletters people could sign up for. We also go out to big city events like Lotus Festival last weekend, or Ciclavia, where hundreds of thousands of people gather around. So, a billboard, people could find that out. So we are doing, interviews like this on the news or with organizations. So that's how we stay afloat and getting our name out.
How is that being received on more traditional lines, with the city, and how is that being received on more contemporary arenas, such as Ciclavia?
Great question. I would say it took a lot for people to get used to. So we got elected doing unconventional things, and now we're in office and we're doing the same. And so I think for people who had traditional views, like, well, you know what, you should be wearing a suit and tie and sometimes dry and boring, but people are starting to realize that that's not what people like, not what draws attention to things. And so we're able to reach a different crowd. We're engaging the youth. We're engaging people on things like TikTok, where people don't talk about politics as often, and getting people voting for the first time, or getting people involved in the issue or the office of the city controller. Because I tell you, before we ran for office, 9 out of 10 people had no idea what the controller's office was or did. They're like, oh, do you control the city? And it's like, a little bit, but I don't control it literally. But now, I think thanks to our office, we're really bringing our office more attention and getting people more involved in the political process.
Okay, well, it's certainly obvious how old I am sitting here with you. So we're going to talk about this just slightly. How do you walk that line between gathering attention and garnering attention, and being taken seriously, and also having what you say carry the weight necessary, because these are serious subjects?
Of course.
I mean, you can be whimsical working out while you're talking about the budget, but when you're dealing with people's lives and the city mechanics of it, how are you walking that line so that you're not being dismissed by the entrenched part of this, but you're being educating the maybe haven't paid attention to it part before?
Great question. So when it comes to certain topics, certain issues, we have a lot of serious videos, that would be viewed as, okay, that's a very serious side. But if it's general transparency or general things about teaching people about how to read a budget, or this is how much money we're spending this year, we can change up our tactics. We could be more casual. We could be funnier. We could do the latest TikTok trend. I think that's also depending on which outlet you're using to post on. Because on certain outlets, you have a different demographic. TikTok tends to be Gen Z or millennials. Facebook tends to be, professionals, adults, working class. And so we'll post differently on there. So really it depends on what the issue we're talking about, and also who are we catering to with this. And so that seems to, we've been doing this for 3 years since 2020. So I feel like we sort of got in the knack down. Some people will just never get it, and that's fine. Like it's things change over time, and you can always agree to disagree. But it's been working for us since we've started 3 years ago. So.
Well, along those lines, are you completely enamored with the realm of public service? I mean, is this something that you want to continue with? Have you found your calling? Is this it? And are you going to bring others with you?
Oh yeah, I mean, there are so many people who have been inspired and they want to do more for their community just because of what we're doing, because they saw a funny video that we did about something, and it was really educational, but it got their attention. So I think that what I hope and what we hope in our office is to inspire others to take up this, grab the mantle and continue this pathway of education, of transparency, of identifying what's wrong with the system, and fixing the system that we live in. So that's our goal.
And what have you learned from those that have been in the system for a long time? I mean, I think what I've learned sitting at this desk is that everybody truly has their heart in the right place, because this is not some, this is a tough job, no matter what seat you're sitting in. But what have you learned, since you've been in office that you might be surprised, surprised yourself in finding out?
Well, number one, I really love this job. People think government jobs might be boring or a politician, but I love it. I think this is the best job I've ever had. I get to do something that I love to do, and I get to help people. People think I'm out there doing speeches every hour, every day. I'm out there sitting behind a computer, crunching numbers and Excels and giving people data, working with our team to create these websites. Working with our comms team to make awesome videos to educate people, going out into the community. So that's number one. I really enjoy being the city controller. Number two, I think you're right. People work in government have their heart in the right place. They want to do good. What I think and what I've learned on why that's not enough is there are times where bureaucracy or red tape, or, oh, actually, you can't do that. We haven't done that before. We're not used to this. Slows things down. And I think what we're trying to do is say, no, we have to be innovative. We are in an emergency right now. We have to figure out ways to tackle these issues, these problems. Because if every year we're going to say the same thing, oh, this is just the way it is. This is how it is. And it's like, okay, well, if this is the way it is, then we're just going to have people continue to be dying on our streets. We're going to continue to have people being evicted, people being harassed in their apartments. We're going to continue having animals being stuffed in kennels with 4 other dogs. And that's the sad reality of it. And what I try to do is say, look, y'all, like, this is not working. Or it's working, but if this is the way you intended the system to work, then this is not good enough. And I think that's what I'm trying, and our office is trying to work with in order to change that, right? Or what you also notice too is like, you know what, Kenneth, we'll make an exception for this one, but it's like, no, just change the entire system or the practice so that you don't have to give, to give this shortcut. Like, make it so it's easy for the people of LA and for our city employees who do this work. So I'd say that's the second thing too that I've learned.
So needless to say, I'm sure anyone who's watching is very intrigued and wants to find out, where all of this information, all of these maps, all of these audits, all of these videos, all of this, newsletters and listening sessions are happening. How can they find out?
Controller.lacity.gov.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been truly, unequivocally fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.